Sometimes the best stories in golf aren't found on tour. You'll find them at the back of the range. And here's your host, Ben Adelberg.
Thank you again for joining me here at the back of the range. I am your host, Ben Adelberg, and this is episode 9. As always, thanks very much to Mitch Phillips. He does our voiceover work around here. You can find him at mpvoice.com. Check him out. He has graciously provided his support of this podcast. Wow, what a weekend. I spent a couple days at the Honda Classic this past week at PGA National in Palm Beach Gardens. That place is crazy. Actually, it's really two completely different events. If you're looking to follow a group and watch your favorite player, Thursday is the day to go. The crowds aren't that bad. It has a pretty laid-back feel to it and a lot of room to move around. But on Saturday, and I'd imagine Sunday, well, that is all about the party. Not as many golf fans, quote-unquote, but plenty of serious drinkers, and those tents in the Bear Trap were rocking. So we have tons of videos and photos that I still need to get up on our Instagram page. So if you have not done so, follow that page. It's the Back of the Range podcast. So we have some good videos that were sent in by some friends and some that I took myself. Before I forget, our website is www.thebackoftherange.com. That is where you can find all of our episodes, links to how to subscribe in Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or Google Play, Overcast. So that's basically our home base. So check that out. If you want to shoot me an email, you can also do so at ben@thebackoftherange.com. Don't forget, the more people you tell about the podcast, the bigger it grows, the better guests, and who doesn't want that? So this week's guest is TJ Shuart from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What has TJ done? Well, all he's done is participate in 11 USGA championships, and he's one of the last men to accomplish the unique feat of qualifying for the USAM, the US Mid-Am, and the US Amateur Public Links in the same year. He played collegiately at Loyola University and has some great stories about some matches against current professionals like Ricky Barnes and Ryan Moore. Additionally, he's launched his own amateur golf tour here in South Florida, and we're going to get into that also. So, TJ, you're at the back of the range. How you doing?
Ben, fantastic, man. Thanks for having me. Look forward to being a part of the program with you.
Well, I know you and I have known each other for quite a long time, just playing amateur tournaments around the state of Florida through a lot of Florida State stuff and some USGA. You've had a hell of a career as a qualifier for a lot of USGA events. And before we talk about just your start in the game and what's led you to the success that you've obviously had, what are you working on, and how is your game right now?
Yeah, it's been good. You know, I've went through quite an experience this year, and it's a challenging game at times. We all know that, and I've been fortunate enough to accomplish some nice things, you know, in this game. But as you know, you never have it all, and you know, the game probably takes a lot more than it gives. So it's been exciting for me to keep competing amateur golf. So to that end, I always want to be competing. If I don't have a tournament on the schedule, I get antsy, and so I'm always trying to compete. But I've spaced it out a lot. I've got access to some nice events around the country, and you can't play them all. At the end of the day, I have a career, I have a job, I have things outside of golf that take up my time and my focus. So I've figured out a way to sort of create a schedule that affords me the ability to play and compete, but also space it out a little bit. But it's been fun. I've got access to some great events. Results, you know, recently haven't been that great for me, and sort of kind of what I was alluding to before. It's sort of that ongoing quest that we have with the game of golf, and so I've been able to have a lot of success in the recent years. In the body of the last 6 to 9 months, haven't played as well as I've wanted to. And so part of the fun of the challenge of this game is that it's never easy. It's never right there. And you're always searching for ways to improve and kind of bounce back when it doesn't go as well as you want to. So been able to play some great events this year, travel to some nice parts of the country. Haven't put any victories on the board. And part of the challenge when you have success and you do well is there's sort of increased expectations. And so I'm going through a period of time now where I haven't sort of reached those expectations and sort of those accomplishments that I've sort of created myself in the last, say, 1 to 2 to 4 years. And so I've got to find that and get that back. And that's the beauty of this game, that you're always going to kind of go through periods of time where you don't play as well as you want to, and I've had that experience too of late. So it goes up and it goes down. That's the game of golf. We see it even at the highest level. Players missing cuts and being out of contention and shooting high scores, and then coming back to win the very next week. So it's the game we love, and I look forward to continuing to press on and work to get better. And get back to some of the fantastic results that I was fortunate enough to achieve in recent years.
So it sounds like you've just been playing like a mere mortal.
Very much so.
Oh.
Whatever a level below that is.
Oh, well, that's where I'm at. So join. It's the water's warm, so hop on in. So just grab a beer, and it's there's no, I totally understand what you're saying. You get a taste of a really good run of tournaments and results, and the swing feels good, and then obviously life gets in the way, and it just kind of fades away for a little while, and then you got to chase and get it back. But you're right, that's what makes this game great. And then obviously as a mid amateur, now you're 34 years old, correct? Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So obviously you're not a college kid. You got to work for a living. You got to have real world issues and responsibility. So of course, now before you became a fully functioning adult with real responsibilities and real job requirements and mortgage to pay and all that stuff. So what was your start? What was your start in the game of golf? I'm
like a lot of folks in that it was my father that brought me into the game. As a kid, I ran around, played every sport. It was pretty athletic. I was a big, actually, football and basketball player first, and got to high school and hadn't hit my growth spurt yet, and I was just a little guy, and went to a big-time athletic program, high school, down here in Fort Lauderdale, St. Thomas, and realized pretty quickly I was not going to be playing football or basketball, given what I was up against with my size and just the athletic prowess with some of my peers. Started playing golf more. It was something my father exposed me to probably as young as the age of 7 or 8. But again, I was active in multiple different sports and had interest, quite frankly, in other sports above golf. But I had to do something in high school to play athletically and compete, and I sort of gravitated toward golf simply on account of the fact that I wasn't big enough or strong enough to play football or basketball at that time. So played as a freshman at St. Thomas in high school, was not any good. Really wasn't that great of a player, to be frank, and wasn't someone that really devoted myself to the game of golf. Probably by the time I was getting out of high school, I started to sort of realize some of my potential after a couple of years of kind of competing and playing and growing. And so it was a sort of a process over many years, but certainly, appreciate everything obviously my father did in introducing me to the game, but also doing it the right way, allowing me to naturally flow to golf as my primary sport. I was lucky enough to have access, to play golf and have a father who, taught me the game and kind of, put me in an environment where I could travel and play some tournaments and compete. And the rest was on me. I don't like, I'm a competitive guy, and I didn't like that I wasn't very good in the beginning. And it seems like the irony in sort of where I got to today was that I was really much better at other sports than I was at golf. And it was in part because of the fact that I wasn't very good at it, that I had a desire to continue to try to excel at it and get better at it. So that transition, that breaking point, to commit to golf really happened in that 14, 15, 16-year-old age. And then obviously being able to accomplish enough to go to a Division I college program at Loyola University and play 4 years of Division I golf.
So it's interesting. You're talking about your introduction into the game from your father, and you've been around a lot of juniors, as have I. Just whether it's at golf courses, country clubs, different events. Obviously state amateur qualifiers, U.S. amateur qualifiers. What's your kind of take on the how junior golf is now, because you're basically saying that it wasn't that you got pushed in, you didn't have someone shuttling you from this tournament to this coach to this practice facility to this outing. You kind of had a drive inside of you to get better at something that you just weren't good at. Instead of tossing it away and say, well, that's just not my thing, I'm not good at it, you just did not like failing and chased after it. How does that compare with what you're seeing now with some of the juniors, where they just feel maybe too much pressure from the parents or too much pressure from coaches, and feel that every round of golf is could either help them or hurt them when it comes to getting access to a college scholarship?
Yeah, certainly. I think that's something that you're seeing a lot more of now. I mean, it's a fine line. I mean, certainly you want, the support system that parents afford you as a kid, really, and that's really what it boils down to. Without the support of your parents to be able to even to travel and to spend money and spend time to play these events, I really look back at it now. I don't have kids of my own yet. So I haven't had that experience, but to realize, everything that my parents did for me, for me to even be able to explore golf as an option is really something that, you take for granted as a kid, and you realize now it's really shaped part of who I am as a person. Certainly you see the scenarios with, overexertion of pressure, from parents to kids
Sure.
at a young age. There's so much access out there now. The game with players like Tiger Woods of our era and now Jordan Spieth, they're glorified on television. They make tons of money. And so obviously people see that and they want to gravitate toward that. They want to be that person one day. And so what happens is there ends up being a tremendous amount of energy put toward that goal, probably oftentimes at quite an early age. So at the end of the day, when it comes to golf is an individual sport. When you have an individual sport, nobody else is setting up your practice times or your games. You're on your own to develop as a person and to practice and work at your game. And that's really where golf separates from a lot of the other major professional sports, where by and large you're a part of a team. And you need, if you want to play football or basketball, you need to be a certain size. There's a lot of things that kind of happen in other sports. Also, your prime and your peak years are really much younger in these other sports like football and basketball, where golf is something that you're really not necessarily even hitting your prime till your later years in life. So certainly to answer your question, I appreciated the way that I was handled, which was I was put in an environment to compete and to play sports and be active. But ultimately, I gravitated to the sport that I wanted to for the reasons I wanted to, and not for anyone else. So it's a balance. You want the support system, with your parents and your peers and whomever it is that helps you along the way, to push you and to sort of put you in the environment where you're able to participate. But certainly at the end of the day, it has to be your decision. And it was with me with golf,
Right.
And nobody else can create that for you.
So, and obviously this worked out well for you, because as you said, you transitioned from being at St. Thomas Aquinas in Fort Lauderdale, got enough of a high school and junior golf playing resume put together where you were able to go to Loyola in Maryland, and you're 4-time all-conference. What was it about playing at St. Thomas Aquinas and your high school experience? What was it like just walking on, or not as a walk-on, but what was it like going to this college team, going to Loyola, far away from home? What was that experience like? I know we can't get into every single story you have. What'd you think about college golf?
Yeah, probably one of the most interesting and unique and sort of formative experiences, I would say, of my early years. As you alluded to, just first and foremost, being away from home. There was a lot of challenge for me, and quite frankly, a lot of setbacks. I went from sort of this position as I was the number one, alpha player at a major South Florida high school, and I was on the up and up, to really going into freshman year and saying, okay, I'm at Loyola, I've got academic responsibilities, I'm in a different part of the country. All of a sudden, college is social, right? For the first time in your life, you're away from, your parents' home, and you have this social element of your life. And then you have, a different part of the country that you have to compete on the golf side too. So the responsibilities academically, the want to meet new people and experience all those fantastic things about college that we all know and love. Certainly those two aspects, were to some extent impediments to my growth on the golf side. So my freshman year was very challenging. I remember academically running into a couple of bumps where I actually had to study. I had to do homework. It was no longer kind of cruising through. Yes, believe it or not, if I wanted to remain, eligible and remain scholarship worthy and graduate from college, I had to actually, apply myself a little bit more so than I did in high school. And so that was a huge learning curve for me. Obviously, just going into all the responsibility again that I had academically, and then going to golf tournaments where the weather was maybe 40, 50 degrees in the morning, and all of a sudden I'm playing on bent grass greens and wearing 4 layers and saying, well, this isn't the summer in South Florida.
Kind of hard to get loosened up after all that, yeah, I was just thinking, wow, you had I went to more than one college. That's how much I like college. I just sampled a few, but stick with one, do your thing. So you had the issues, the freshman bumps, getting through, just basically just learning how to manage your time, I would imagine, and just
Sure.
balancing school and you got to hit a couple keggers. I mean, you got to do a little bit of that stuff while you're.
Absolutely.
Tell me about Tell me about your relationship with your coach. Was he really a kind of a hands-off guy? Was he, my way or the highway? What was that aspect like?
My relationship with my coach is great. The backstory, as I was kind of kicking the tires on where I would go to college and how I would find myself to playing Division I college golf, it was kind of getting late in the whole process, and got a phone call from a gentleman by the name of Tom Bittleman. He had just taken over the program at Loyola, and he said, I've seen your resume and some of your videos here. I'd love to have you come take a look. And at that time, Loyola wasn't really on my radar, but I went up, took a visit, really liked him, and ended up just saying, you know what, I'm gonna commit to this program. It's Division I, it's a great education, different part of the country, and let's go have this experience. Tom was a great guy. I prefer a coach that certainly, does the right things to put you in a position to succeed, but he wasn't overbearing. There's a balance again in college golf where you are dealing with personalities. You are dealing with individuals who got to where they got at that point, by and large, through their own work ethic and their own accomplishments. And so you see a lot of times in college golf sort of this disconnect between these emerging brash young kids and these coaches that want to sort of control them. And that's the unique element that golf brings as an individual sport is, by and large, for the bulk of my life, I've never really had to worry about anyone else, in terms of a team game. A little bit in high school, certainly 4 years in college, but golf is an individual sport. So there's that sort of uniqueness of coming into a team environment, responding to a coach. But Tom was a great guy. He knew what made his players tick. He supported us. He put us, in some great events and sent us around the country a little bit, which was great. So we got to travel. But he's much more what you would call a player's coach, more so than a drill sergeant or a taskmaster. And that probably to some extent just comes with the fact that you're at Loyola University. Now you're not necessarily, at Georgia or at Texas, but it was a great experience. He was, obviously I was his first primary recruit. And so Loyola at the time really didn't have much of a track record. We were then in the MAC conference and had since transitioned to the Patriot League. But when Tom came in, we won 3 of 4 conference championships. Some local guys started to follow and join the program, and we ended up winning, I think at some point it was 9 out of 10 MAC conference championships from the 2001-2 year forward. So a lot of success came out of the program. I'm happy to be a part of that to some extent in the beginning with Tom, and he did a great job of just being kind of one with his players and being a guy that was able to accommodate and understand what made his players happy and how to support us and just be one of the guys. And sometimes that's good enough. is letting your guys be your guys, particularly in an individual sport like golf.
Well, with your experience playing at Loyola, I would imagine at some tournaments you would have run across some guys that clearly you saw their talent level was going to take them elsewhere. So were there any professionals that are currently on the tour now that you ran into that caught your attention?
I would say specific to the college experience, the one that jumps out was Ryan Moore. At Loyola, we didn't obviously play a heavy Southern or Western schedule. We didn't play a lot of events against the top 25 or 50 programs in college golf. So we by and large played in the Northeast, but sort of similar to basketball and golf, if you're able to win your conference championship, you do get into postseason play. And so that's sort of where we got a taste of the larger programs. And in 2005, Caves Valley in Baltimore was set to host the NCAA Division I National Championship. And they ran an event in the fall called the Preview. And what that did was invited the best programs in college golf and the host program, which was set to be Loyola, to play in an event in the fall and get a taste of the venue where the national championship would be. Me being fortunate enough to be the number one player at Loyola and be a part of the host program, let's just say we had a little bit of say in the pairings. And so as I scanned the list of programs that were coming, Ryan Moore had won the United States Public Links, the United States Amateur, and I believe the Western Amateur. He was the most decorated amateur in the country at that time, probably a rising senior at UNLV. So I requested that pairing. I played 36 holes with him at Caves Valley, and it was a great experience. I think, if I recall correctly, I had a couple of 73s, and I think he had something like a 72-69. So certainly didn't expect to be able to beat him over 36 holes, given his stature in the game and my progression at that point. But to be within earshot of him was fun. To play 36 holes with a guy that was clearly on his way to going to the next level was just a super experience for me. And the funny part of it is that in the second round, I was so sort of just kind of drained after the 36 holes. We're taking pictures and sort of shaking hands and doing this whole post-round thing that I actually signed the wrong scorecard. So any golfer will kind of almost chuckle at that score. Luckily, I ended up signing in a way that didn't really hurt our team that much. An expensive lesson to learn at the time that you got to not only focus all the way through 18 holes, but go ahead and focus the extra 2 or 3 minutes to make sure your scorecard's right. But certainly a tremendous experience for me being around Ryan. A number of other events we played, Kevin Na, Hunter Mahan, Ricky Barnes, all these guys that have had been out there or are still out there to some extent. It's been a fun part for my career as I've remained amateur to watch some of these guys that I've competed against, particularly in the college years. But Ryan Moore would be one that jumped out just because he had accomplished everything you could want to accomplish in the amateur game. And not only being in the same field with him, but playing 36 holes alongside of him, it was a great experience.
And did it jump out at you right then when you're playing with these guys that it was clearly, because I guess where I'm going with this is you're the number one guy at Loyola, you're hanging with a guy like Ryan Moore. Was there something specifically that hit you as they're going to go this direction, I'm just not? Or did you entertain those thoughts after you graduated? What was the defining, or was there any sort of a defining characteristic in their games that you saw that you just didn't have in yours?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of both. I mean, I think you all know how fine the line is in golf. I mean, we see it every day. It's a shot here or there that determines whether a guy has a job on the PGA Tour next year, as we see the Web.com Tour just wrap up their final series here. And it's no different in the amateur game. There's a fine line sometimes between some of the best players and some players that aren't quite at that level. So I would say certainly with Ryan, there was an element of him that, he's a talented player. He strikes the ball well. He's consistent. He keeps it in front of him. He doesn't hurt himself. I knew at that very moment Ryan Moore is a better golfer than TJ Shuart. I knew that. What I was pleased to find out over the 36 holes of playing with him was that there wasn't necessarily some monumental gap. For example, I hit my driver well better than he did and passed him. But certainly he was a better iron player. Certainly he got the ball in the hole better. And the fact of the matter is he was just a more accomplished and better golfer at that time. But I came away encouraged being a part of that, playing next to him. At that time, I probably had different goals than him. He was a blue chip collegiate player, all world's number one ranked amateur. I was a nice collegiate player at a small Northeastern university. There's just a difference between us in that moment. And I was comfortable with the amateur game. I was comfortable being the best college player I could be, and had no real notions and desires, even as I was a senior in college, that I would necessarily pursue the game professionally. So I just took it as an experience, getting the taste of playing against a player of that caliber and sort of being alongside for that ride, understanding that they're more accomplished, but also understanding that, you've got room to develop as a player, and you from that, what did that player do better? Why is that player better? Why is he shooting lower scores? And so I would say there's aspects of my game that were just as good, but certainly when you think about, his tenacity, his short game, the way he got the ball in the hole, and he was just a more developed and better player. And I was just felt happy to be kind of along for that ride and playing next to him. And I still follow his career to this day. It's cool to see him have the success that he's had. And it was just a great experience for me to be alongside one of the top players in college golf was fun for me, and just helped shape my love for the game and my want to get better and my want to compete.
So once you got out of Loyola, you graduated, and knowing your record in FSGA events and United States Golf Association events, a lot of your success has been after the age of 25. So did you pretty much take the road of, okay, I'm out of college, I can't play golf every day, I need to get my career going? What did you do to get your career moving along? And then it sounds, you got back on track as far as your amateur playing career after the age of 25. So what was that like, transitioning from I'm playing every day and now I'm trying to get a career off the ground, and then getting back into golf?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a tricky time in that kind of I'm out of college, now what sort of mentality that I have. And I spent a little bit of time working at TPC Eagle Trace here in South Florida after I graduated. And the somewhat challenging part for me was that I was actually playing the very best golf of my life at that moment. I was probably 22 years old, just out of college, and was playing really, really well. And a case could have been made for me to go the route of trying to play, turning professional and getting out on the mini tours and going through that growth curve to try to become a better player and advance through the ranks. But I was very comfortable with the amateur game. I felt like I still had unfinished business and still was underdeveloped in terms of trying to become a better player, and just had such a desire to continue to be a part of the game as an amateur. I had a taste of the U.S. Amateur in 2004 at Winged Foot and just really loved that experience. So really just made the decision that I wasn't going to turn professional and I was going to play amateur golf. As you alluded to, you're out of college and now life, it's time for life. And so certainly, moved forward, took a job, was very busy, was more worried about, making a living and sort of making this transition in my life from, I play golf all the time and I hang out and live at home, to I'm providing for myself and I'm going to go out and make a living and sort of progress my career. So obviously that, took effect for a while. I was still active. I still played, but just not a ton in that first, say, year or two, kind of in that kind of early 20s, time frame. But just, again, had a love for the amateur game, always knew that I was going to keep pursuing it. And it was about at the age of 25 that I was able to get into some mid-amateur events and just keep getting better as a player. What I will tell you is so much of my success at that sort of 25, 26-year-old age, after having those, couple of years where I was a little busier working and just playing tournaments a little less, was actually psychological, in that I was now working. I had a job in project management in the golf course construction space, and I was working, making money, providing for myself, put a roof over my head. And that was the first time, obviously, in my life I'd really done that. You're out of college and you're into this new experience of, hey, I'm making money, I have a job, and this is great. And so I think psychologically, I sort of grew up and out of, hey, I'm just playing golf and kind of floating, and going through college and going through this 6 months post-college of floating, to I have a career now. I'm doing something. There's more to life than golf. And so there was a piece. I remember when I wrote my first check of an entry fee to a golf tournament. It was the first time in my life I really think I ever did that. I was probably 23 years old, and I said, I'm paying for my own golf tournament. Wow. And so there was a psychology there that I was comfortable with every other aspect of my life, my job, and sort of just my my family and just my friends. And it was this great development in these post-collegiate years. So psychologically, there was so much satisfaction with sort of just that path I was taking that it just spilled over into my golf. And obviously at the age of 25, qualifying for a U.S. amateur and then qualifying for U.S. mid-amateur right on top of that a month later, when I was pretty much working 60 hours a week and maybe hitting balls once a week, was just a huge, huge achievement for me, especially given the fact that I had made this decision to be a career amateur. I think if I didn't play well, it would have been a very difficult thing for me because golf was such a huge part of my life. So I would just say that there was a transition there, like there always is, life cycles, but the psychology around me being content with my life away from golf actually had a extremely positive impact on me, because it was like, hey, I'm going to take the day off work and go try to qualify for the USAM. And if I don't, I'll go back to work and make money the next day and move on. So there was just a psychological element that really was huge for me. And I think it helped me kind of transition and accept, hey, I'm going to play golf recreationally. I'm going to play golf and compete as an amateur. I have other things going on in my life, and I'll be able to get that competitive sort of environment going here. And certainly the psychological aspect of being happy and accomplished sort of away from the golf course was a big thing that sort of put me at ease, and I think it helped me as I transitioned into life as a full-time amateur.
Yeah, I that's an excellent point that you brought up there, because for people listening, as an amateur golfer, if you're trying to find your happiness and making your finding something happy in your life, and you're looking for golf to be that highlight of your life, that's a big warning sign.
Not ideal.
Yeah, that's a warning sign. You need, and even if you're a professional, but especially as an amateur, when you have work and you have kids and relationships, if you're looking for golf, if you're looking for that bucket of balls at night to be the highlight of your day, yeah, you gotta reevaluate that pretty quick. Before we get into now, as I've said earlier, you have won four Florida State Golf Association events, which were the 2015 State Mid-Am and the State Match Play, and then also a couple Pub Links championships in 2012 and 2014. Both the State Mid-Am, which was at Sarah Bay Country Club in Sarasota, Florida, which I absolutely love that course. Any chance I have, there's any tournament over there, any excuse to go play that place, I love Sarah Bay. And then the State Match Play was at Turtle Creek in Tequesta. But the consistent thing is both match play tournaments. So the State Mid-Am, you have to play your 36-hole seeding round, make the cut, and get into the low. Was it 32 or 64 at that time? I know they've changed that format.
Yeah, the mid's 32 and the regular is 64.
Okay, so I looked at how that happened. So you shot 78 in the first round, and then came back with a 67 and ended up as the fourth seed. So you were, I think the cut was 154. So you really had to improve on your first round just to get in, and you drastically improved. And just looking at the names that you ran through to win that championship, Mike Riley's out of Panama City. He's got USGA appearances under his belt. Joe Alfieri played on the Web.com tour. John Veneziano, he's, we would need a whole other podcast to talk about his accomplishments. And then Brian Armstrong, you meet in the final. What was that like, just getting around and running through those matches? And then before we talk about Sarah Bay, we'll just kind of hit a little bit on Turtle Creek, what you did there. 73 in the seeding round, which was just a 18-hole round. That put you at 25 out of 64. So you're pretty much right in the middle. And you ran through, a list of really great players to win that championship. What is it about match play that obviously you're comfortable with? And, what things do you keep in mind for finding success?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, obviously, starting with the match play being the earlier of the two events, probably about 6-8 weeks prior to the Mid-Am. The irony of the match play is that it was initially scheduled to be hosted at Pine Tree Golf Club in Boynton Beach, which is one of my all-time favorite clubs anywhere, particularly in South Florida. Just an awesome golf course and facility and a great membership. And I remember all of a sudden one day the schedule changed, and I emailed the FSGA politely as I could, and basically saying, why in the world is this event not at Pine Tree anymore? It was a great get. Why is it not there? The funny part is I was, in essence, upset at a venue change, and then went on to really enjoy Turtle Creek and play well and go on to win the tournament. So kind of a funny little backstory there. I think really the first thing regarding the success is I was playing well, and that's just a reality that match players stroke play. You got to be in control of your golf game and the way you're playing to have the success that I had in those couple of months that summer with both events. I think there's definitely a mental difference with match play. Certainly there's a luck element too. I remember in the second round of the match play, I probably went to the last hole with John Wegman, a good friend of mine from South Florida. He easily could have beat me. I think I was 2 down through 2 in the semifinals and played a really good collegiate player. Could have easily lost that round. I remember the quarters, I think, went to 19 holes. There was probably 4 different ways I could have lost, in that match play event. So you have to have a little resilience. You have to understand it's hole-by-hole golf. Mentally, I think sometimes you can be a little more aggressive, realizing that obviously if something doesn't go well on a hole, it's just one loss of a hole versus stroke play. So I would just say with Turtle Creek, there was just confidence. I was playing well. I was hitting the ball straight. I'm always a player that's had plenty of length and been a pretty good iron player, but when I'm putting the ball in the fairway, it just puts me in obviously a much better position to take advantage of the strengths of my game. So it was just a great run in that tournament. Confidence builds as the week goes on. You keep beating good players and you just realize, I'm good enough. I can win this event. I'm one of the best players here. Now it's time to prove it. So I was real fortunate to sort of navigate through that. And then obviously moving to the Mid-Am, I would just say again, mentally, I was in a positive frame of mind. I had just beaten a field that was better than the field I was entering to with the Mid-Am. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go up there and lose in the first round, because
Sure.
you certainly can. But there was an element, obviously, of confidence there, certainly in the Mid-Am realm. I think at that time I'm, maybe in my, low 30s, and really felt like I had sort of achieved a lot on the sort of national level with the USGA experiences and obviously the pub links and some state stuff, but it was time, for me to do well in that mid-amateur event. That's our sweet spot, as we know. Once you get into your 30s, that's the event, right? And so
some of us are in our 40s now, TJ. And
yeah, well,
you're going to enjoy. I'm
going to be there soon too, and I'm going to keep calling it my sweet spot, right? I mean, but making the point, I think that certainly once you kind of graduate out of that, I'm 25 and I'm, into my life and have these priorities. The Mid-Am golf, obviously is the focal point, and certainly our state Mid-Am is obviously one of the ultimate events that we would want to do well at. So I definitely carried a lot of, mental positives from the match play straight into Sarah Bay. Sarah Bay is a golf course too that you alluded to. An old style Donald Ross course. It can be maddening at times, but it's a great golf course. And
if you want to, and when I played there, if you just want to really just annoy the hell out of your playing competitors, and if you can chip it and putt it, because you're going to miss tons of greens there because it just rolls off and just for no apparent reason. Man, man, as someone that gets around largely in part of my short game, man, that's so much fun. Just watch people shake their head, and that's not even match play. I did it in a stroke play event there, but to watch them do it in match play, that had to have been just an enormous amount of fun. And then, so I'm going to bring this up as delicately as possible, but you and I have played golf together, and you, shall we say, are rather analytical and kind of in your own element when you're on the course and don't talk a lot. So do you think maybe it was a little bit more of an intimidation factor? Like, wow, this guy is just kind of a, stone cold killer over there and we're not really talking much and he's just doing his thing. Do you think your demeanor on the course, which is obviously not what it is off the course, but do you think your demeanor on the golf course plays into your success and gives you an advantage at times?
I think maybe, finding my zone certainly will help me. I can't certainly speak to the reaction from other people. And I don't think, I've evolved a lot from my younger years. So I'm certainly, when I'm playing with guys, even in a match play setting, I understand that the game is about, camaraderie and cultivating relationships and all that. So I actually enjoy, being complimentary to my playing partners. I think that's just part of the game and part of the etiquette of it. But I think certainly, there's an element of focus within me. At the end of the day, every golfer is different in terms of what, how they approach the game and how they play. There's some people that actually need to be talking the entire time. That's
right.
their fix, and they do that. There's probably some people that need to have an adult beverage at some point in the round. Maybe that's their fix. There's some people that are like me, that just find that if they get too far off a field in conversation, that they will drift a little bit. And that's just the way I'm wired, is that I grew up ADD as a kid. And if I get too far off, I'll have conversations here and there, but certainly if I get too deep into other things, it just takes away from the purpose of what I'm there to do, which is to play my best golf. And I've just figured out that by and large, I got to stay within myself, and I'll have the conversations and the longer conversations that, afterward. But as you alluded to, I mean, it's golf first, and then it's the mental part second. And, certainly there's a lot of people out there that I play golf against and with that I would say don't give a crap, about what my demeanor is, because they're worried about their own game, particularly the younger subset too. So I just think that, the younger kids don't care. I think in the mid-am event, certainly in the first couple of rounds, I would just say if you're going to go down the path of how my opponents are affected by what it is I do or how I play or who I am, I would just say there is certainly an element sometimes of some players, particularly in a mid-am environment, where they kind of find their way into a new spot where they realize they're up against an accomplished player. And I think that is beneficial, certainly, because if you're shooting 151 or 152 and you're going up against a guy that has won tournaments and qualified for U.S. amateurs, I mean, there's certainly an element where you think, okay, I'm going to need my best or some sort of fortuitous situation to win. So I would think that has more to play than any golfer trying to figure out what the demeanor of the other golfer is. There's certainly just an element sometimes where there's a mental side to match play. And I've played against guys that are great guys. You mentioned a couple of them at that tournament, and they're happy to be there, and they know they're good players, but they also know that it has to go well for them, to win the match. So I would say that good golf is really, what trumps all, and certainly playing guys like a Joe Alfieri. We went to the last hole. I hit a 3-wood from 260 to 8 feet to beat him, eagling the last hole. I mean, I could have lost that match. John Veneziano is a friend and one of the better players in the state that we have. Just happened to make some birdies against him and get up and on top of him. But, it's a fine line. Sometimes it could have gone either way. And I'm just focused in a match play setting and getting in the frame of mind that helps me. And it just so happens that for me, it's a quiet approach, and it's approach to, what do I have to do to move forward and compliment my opponent when he hits a good shot. But I'm there to play the golf course and try to win. And that's my primary focus.
So moving from FSGA, and we're just naturally transitioning, you mentioned the U.S. amateurs and other USGA events that you've played in. So you have qualified for 11 USGA events, just one of them, which I believe would have been the 04 USAM you mentioned at Wingfoot. Every other one was after the age of 25. So you were well, you still are actually, you're a mid-am. So 10 out of the 11 you qualified for as a mid-am. And these are 4 USAMs, 5 US mid-ams, 2 US pub links. So, which is incredible record. And what I want to hit on with these is that every one of these tournaments requires a very difficult qualifier. So for those that are listening that don't know, the US Amateur is 36 holes over 2 days. All of these qualifiers, you're walking, carrying your bag, or you have a caddy, but you're walking, and a lot of them are in, June, July, August, the really hot, humid, nasty months here in South Florida. So you have your 4 USAMs you've qualified for. You have 5 US mid-ams. That's 18 holes of qualifying, and then the pub links was 36 holes of qualifying. They don't have the US public links anymore. but what is it about getting through these qualifiers? Because you're playing against the best players in the area. There's normally three. Let's see. I think there's 3 qualifiers for the U.S. Mid-Am in the state of Florida. I think they do about like 7 or 8 around the state for the USAM, and Public Links probably had about 2 or 3, if I remember correctly. So you're really going up against, at least for the AM and Public Links, you're going up against college players, high school studs, really accomplished mid-ams. You're going to find some really accomplished seniors in those mid-am qualifiers. I mean, you're going against the very best in the state. And then, of course, people will come down to Florida that you've never heard of, from California and Vermont and New York, and some guy you've never heard of. And there's always someone like that brings it. How did you get through these qualifiers?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The more I hear you talking about it, it's almost like you're talking me into the belief that it really is hard. Maybe for a while there, I didn't realize how hard it was.
Well, just remember, there are mortals listening to the podcast. Okay, I mean, just keep that in mind.
I'm one of them. We've talked about the success, but I've been a dry spell here for a couple of years where I've missed out, so I know what both sides of the equation are like. But certainly, you referenced 2008, making the U.S. Amateur and the Mid-Am back-to-back. It was actually a period of time where I was traveling out of the state of Florida with work, and one of the roles I had in my earlier years. So I spent some time over in Houston and actually Louisiana for a couple of qualifiers, bouncing around like a nomad, showing up to foreign sites and making it. But I was developing as a player at the age of 25, which is the uniqueness of golf. Was I hadn't even scratched the surface of how good I was at the age of 25. I was a better player at 25 than I ever was at 18 or 21. And to take it a step farther, I was a better player at 30 than I ever was at 25. So certainly there's an element that you got to go for it. A lot of these qualifiers are 70, 80 guys for 2 or 3 spots. You can't just kind of float around and try to make a top 10. That's not what this is about. It's kind of a pass-fail, all or nothing experience. And so this was my life. Amateur golf was sort of, the amateur side of my competitive golf was my life. It was what I wanted to do. Got through some playoffs, and so certainly just trying to buckle down and just be out there with yourself sometimes, to not get really consumed by the moment, which, by the way, it's really, really hard to do.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about these qualifiers, and you've done a lot more of them and had much more success than I have, but, I've done the state AMs and the state mid AMs and the match plays, but it seems like, how do you get it out of your head? And this applies just to everyone. Like, you go to these qualifiers and everyone says, so what do you think the number's going to be? And for an 18-holer, the number, well, you shoot par, you're going to be in, or if, 1 or 2 over, you're probably in a playoff. And it's almost like you get to the golf course, you get set up, and it's almost like you're chasing a number, and it's all consuming. So how did you find yourself getting mentally prepared to get into these qualifiers, abandon the thought of, okay, here's what I want to shoot today, or did you put a number? Like, how did you do that?
Yeah, no, that's a great observation, because obviously that in the world of qualifiers, it is very different. I'm not focused on what's the result going to be. I'm focused on what's my process to get where I want to be and put myself in my best position to play good golf and succeed. So I think a lot of my focus was again, just on how I played the golf course. And it was very much about me, traversing through the golf course and putting myself in a position to be successful. And listen, I can't control what anyone else shoots. So there's some measures in amateur golf, actually, because it's just less developed than the professional game, where there's actually a benefit, because you don't have access to all the information that some bigger events or professional events have. So sometimes it makes it easier. But just being comfortable with what I want to do and how I want to play golf, enjoying my experience. The chips fall where they may, and I'll move on to play another tournament if I don't get into this one. So that was really the focus for me. I think it really jives with sort of your prior question about sort of my frame of mind when I play golf, and thinking about the end game and the results too much is by and large just not a process that I wanted to follow. I wanted to focus on the shot that was in front of me and executing that shot, and wherever I stood at the end, it was what it was, and I would learn from that experience.
And when you were getting ready for these qualifiers, did you have any sort of specific preparation techniques that you adopted? Did you tailor your equipment for the event? Did you try and get extra practice rounds? What did you do to get your game ready for these big qualifiers?
Yeah, as best you can. I mean, I think, part of the limitations we have as amateur golfers is that we don't do this every day, and our access is sometimes limited. So I would say that multiple practice rounds typically is a rarity. But if you're local and if you can get out to a course in advance, certainly it helps. So I think it's just a lot of your own regimen and routine, at your local club. Certainly, in my younger years, there was very limited practice sometimes in exploration of the golf course. But as I've moved on, I have access to practice at my club, Fort Lauderdale Country Club, and so I'll go through a routine of just trying to work on my weaknesses, probably in that 14 to 30 days, if you will, in advance of an event. So there's sort of a process of my own. Practicing away from the venue, but then certainly accessing the golf course and understanding how it'll play, where it yields scoring opportunities, where the difficult holes are. Certainly equipment changes are a big part of what I do. When I travel to, certain clubs around the country or certain golf courses, I'll have different, clubs in play, maybe such as a driving iron. When I play in South Florida, a lot of times it's a 5-wood. You kind of hit it high and long, and that's the way a lot of South Florida golf courses are. So you alluded to equipment, certainly understanding, there's times I go to a golf course and there's just not a 5-wood out there for me,
Sure.
So why even carry it in the bag? A lot of short game work, understanding the green surrounds, and so preparation on a golf course is, okay, obviously, here's the green, but, where am I if I miss the green? Because we're going to do that 3, 4, 5, 8, 9 times around, depending on the day. So I think there's a preparation on understanding, how to get the ball up and down and how the course is playing that way. Because as we know, short game will be a big part, of our success in any tournament. So I would just say it's a collaboration of preparation, locally. Honestly, beyond golf, in the week or two leading up to these events, I change my lifestyle a little bit sometimes. Certainly, I like to go out and have fun and enjoy my time, with my friends, but I don't do a ton of that probably in the, at least in the 7 days prior to an event, because I know I'm probably going to be walking. I'm going to want to be well hydrated. I'm going to want to be in good physical condition. And
you're not talking about like stop drinking alcohol, are you? Is that what you're leading up to?
Yeah, but like I said, I limited it down to 5 or 7 days. I think in my younger years it might have even been, more than that. But
don't scare, there's people listening to this thing that don't scare people into that. You got to cold
each
turkey.
their own. Everybody's different. I think there's some people that actually would prefer maybe a cocktail or two before bed, and I think that might be the right move for some people. So I wouldn't say I subscribe to that theory 24/7, 365. Certainly, I want to enjoy my life, and there is more to life than competitive golf, but. You're talking about USGA qualifiers, and you're alluding to some of these events where you're walking, you're playing 36. And so I would just say, when I know I've got a particularly grueling event ahead, whether it's a 54-hole event or whether it's a USGA qualifier, as you alluded to, in the hot sun of South Florida, I just say I might make a few sort of edits with my routine in that 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days leading up to it. Just to put myself in the best sort of, physical state of mind before
Absolutely.
the event as well.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I wish you luck in this year's USGA qualifiers. I hope you can add to your total of 11 appearances. I think that you are probably one of the last people that qualified for all three in the same year, the US Am, US Mid-Am, and the US Public Links, because they did get rid of that. So that's a nice little kudos to put on the resume. So you've played in 11 USGA championships. A lot of these championships have keynote speakers. I'm sure there's a lot of people that you've come across that have moved on to the professional ranks. Give me a good story about one of your experiences at a USGA event that really sticks out in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's hard to narrow it down to one, but I'll request the honor for brevity. Certainly on the speaker side, meeting Arnold Palmer at a U.S. Amateur, Condoleezza Rice at the U.S. Mid Amateur, sort of just these different figures that are in the game of golf that show up at these USGA events. They really make it substantial. On the players' side, I played and became friendly with Stuart Hagstad, and this is a guy that, again, is following the career amateur path and won the U.S. Mid-Am, played in the Masters, and not only played but made the cut, and that was cool, getting to play some practice rounds with him back when he was younger and just a student at USC, and now he's transitioned into the mid-amateur game, playing with a guy by the name of Doug Gim, who just won the Walker Cup for Team USA. He's a runner-up at the Pub Links and the U.S. Amateur, a really heralded amateur. So there's a number of little things, but it's just at the end of the day, the best way to answer that is you get to be around some people that have accomplished a lot, and oftentimes, if it's an amateur event, they're just going on to bigger and better things, and you get a taste of that. And then I would just say there's some big figures that you realize that are really connected to golf. Again, whether it's a former president of the United States or a political figure, or just some of the greats of the game, whether it's an Arnold Palmer or a Jack Nicklaus. It's just great to be able to be around people that show up and sort of support these amateur events, because obviously, as I've alluded to time and again, that's the ultimate for me. I'm not driving toward any tour type of experience. So if I can be a part of a USGA event or a national amateur event that affords me access and experience with some prominent figures and some people that support the game of golf, it's just a part of my lifelong experience as an amateur that I'll always store in my memory bank.
So just moving on here. So, you've had your FSGA success, your Florida success. You've had your USGA success, and then you kind of branch off into your own and you start your own amateur golf tour. So, I remember when you spoke to me about this when you were first getting it going, and I followed a lot of its success. We have a little bit of time left, so I want to get into that. There's a couple other things I want to get into, but talk to me about the South Florida Amateur Golf Tour. How did this start, and tell our listeners a little bit about it.
We do have a great state golf association, obviously with the FSGA, and certainly one of the premier regional organizations with the folks in Palm Beach. But by and large, in that southeastern Miami, Broward, South Palm Beach corridor, I felt that there was just a lot of active golfers and a lot of great golf courses, and there wasn't anything specific to the local environment. So really just trying to kind of fill a need, trying to grow the game, and trying to provide the local audience in my hometown a forum to play good golf courses and to compete, and then also to stretch the opportunity beyond just the best golfers in the area to the more everyday golfer. And so the flighted approach and allowing that 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 handicapper to play against a peer and compete, that was a big calling for me to try to expand the competitive golf environment beyond just a good player. And I just had a background and a desire to be a part of great events. I've always been an event management guy, a creator, in sort of being parts of things that are competition, tournament environments. It's always been in my DNA and blood. So it spoke to sort of my entrepreneurial background and spirit to try to create something that worked and made sense and that spoke to the local audience. So first event was quite funny. I had 17 players and we played in the driving rainstorm at TPC Eagle Trace, and I was like, all right, this may not last very long, as I have people giving me the side-eye look, and I'm just waving them on to keep playing because there's no thunder and lightning. But It was fun. I think there's the getting the players part, and then there's the venues part. And like anything, you have to have a product that speaks to people and to the golfers. So I was very fortunate to leverage my relationships with a lot of great golf professionals and general managers in the community, and remember using TPC Eagle Trace at the time, certainly one of the flagship clubs of South Florida, fully private. And so, putting people on great courses on the weekend and sort of giving that weekend warrior element to the tour was a big aspect. So just trying to find an unmet demand and deliver a product that I felt the market would respond to, and not be overly concerned with needing some explosive growth or needing to make a bunch of money of it. It was just a calling to grow the game and to foster a community for for competitive golf, and it's been a fantastic ride. I'm 6 years in, serving over 400 people. The events are small, they're niche. I run events with anywhere from 22, 24 to maybe 48, 50 people, depending on any given month. It's spaced out. I have a career away from the South Florida Amateur Golf Tour, and I'm only one person. I'm a one-man band with a little help of some great starters that I have in the local area. So it's a spaced out, nichey little tour, but it's run on great clubs, and it speaks to some of the things that I believe are important to amateur golf, which is give people a good experience, play a good course, and get them competing. At the end of the day, it's always been kind of my opinion in golf, and this may be a little bit narrow, but I'm okay in saying it. If you're not competing, I don't really know what you're doing. I don't know why. I just think that you've got to have some sort of want to get better.
Sure.
I've never been out there just to exist. So it just kind of speaks to my DNA of wanting to compete. And luckily the market's responded. Like I said, I just wanted something local and simple that served our audience. And we get on great venues. We manage it tightly. The pace of play element is fast. We're playing events in 3.5 hours, maybe 3:45, 3:55. So we're beating the average tournament experience by 30, 40 minutes and getting people in and out the door and meeting good local friends. And, again, whether it's a small field or a slightly bigger field, people get a good experience. They play a good club. They meet some good friends. And that's what it's all about. And I'm perfectly happy with it in its current state, which is just a simple resource for local golfers. And last but not least, I've met a lot of great people along the way, and I think that's been just as fun as anything else.
Sure. And the thing I really like about the tour, and this is kind of one of my questions that I always ask people about how to grow the game and how to grow amateur golf, is a guy that shoots 78, 79, 82 at his local club, to get him to take the leap into playing tournament golf away from his buddies and away from his course, and to go out and play in a tournament setting, that guy, you might be able to get him out once or twice to play in a field against players of your caliber, but he's never going to stay there. You really don't want, those guys don't want to come play against you, TJ, and kind of get their head kicked in. So, what's out there for those players where they can still compete against, players of good skill level, and feel that they can be competitive and not have to worry about this guy's sandbag and he's trying to cheat the system. So that's one thing that I really like about it. I think it's great that you're not just targeting something towards the elite amateur. You're targeting anyone that really just wants to come out and compete, and you'll find a way to make it competitive for them.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, and what's the link for the tour? Because we're going to put it in the show notes, but what's the link?
Yeah, so the link is just www.sf, as in South Florida, amtour.com, sfamtour.com.
So, I guess, one other thing I wanted to hit on, I know that you mentioned with the USGA, your experiences there has really kind of opened doors to other national invitational events that you've played. And, when I heard this, I knew I had to ask you a little bit about this. So one of the more exclusive tournaments, and I think it actually really fits in with, the history there. So the Coleman Invitational at Seminole Golf Club in Juno Beach. So for people that don't know, Seminole was actually the spot that Ben Hogan would hang out at in the winter to get ready for the Masters. This is an invitational where, these are the top names around the country, around the state. And, how did you get an invite to play in that for the 2016? And then also you win it. You win the tournament in your first appearance in it, which is, I don't think if that's ever happened. Give me just a little taste about what it was like being at Seminole.
Yeah, absolutely. In regards to just being able to be lucky enough to be involved, I had some help, from some good friends. It's partly about your experience as a player and your accomplishments, but it's just obviously fortunate enough to be lucky enough to be involved like that. The fact that, one of the greatest golf clubs in our country supports amateur golf and to a further extent mid-amateur golf, it's just something that we just couldn't be any luckier. as mid-amateur golfers to be able to have that access and to be a part of a place that's special. And, as far as the results, certainly not expected. Obviously, I had plenty of belief in my ability and my game and had done a lot of nice things up until that point at the state level and at the national level, but this was certainly a different environment. And, being lucky enough to play the way I wanted to play, it was up and down, and it wasn't always pretty. But at some of these events, you got a difficult golf course, and you got to understand that everybody's going to struggle at some point. So it was really just fortunate to kind of keep my head down and play well, and ended up being in a playoff with a couple other elite national mid-am players and surviving that playoff. But just an all-world experience. It's one of the most special properties in the country in terms of the golf course, the history, and the fact that they support amateur golf the way they do is amazing. And I just feel lucky to be a part of that and to be able to walk through the front door, and the people that are associated with the club too, the staff and the friendliness and the way they welcome you. It's just something that you truly ask yourself all week, hey, I'm really lucky to just be a part of this. And it's one of those unique experiences where we spend so much of our life being governed by our results and how we do on the golf course. But it's truly the type of week that you literally just say, by being here, by being a part of this golf club for the week and this event and these people, I've already won.
Well, that's a hell of an accomplishment to win an event like that in your first trip there. And I would imagine you'll be invited back as many times as you'd like. So enjoy that one. And, anytime there's a way you can put me in the trunk of your car and sneak me in there, you just let me know.
And now, time for a quick bucket.
We're at the end of the episode. We have a segment called the quick bucket because there's always time for a quick bucket when you're at the back of the range. These are just random questions. First one, since I know your affinity for a certain professional football team here in South Florida, how do you fix the Miami Dolphins?
Well, I'm not an executive, but I will say this, in the NFL, stability at the top and the ability to draft and cultivate players who get into their prime and on their second contract is really the way you win in this league. And the Dolphins don't have a tremendous amount of that. Some of the good players they have left, and they've went the free agency route over the years with a couple of players that some of which have panned out, others haven't. So I would say that would be one angle, and obviously play at the quarterback position is just paramount in the NFL. When you think about the last 10 or 15 Super Bowl champions, by and large, you had elite quarterbacks or you had serviceable quarterbacks with just elite defenses. And so I think that's a big part of the framework of how the Miami Dolphins move forward. They've got a lot committed, to Ryan Tannehill, and certainly getting Cutler available this year, I think was a nice option for them. There's rarely a player of that pedigree on the free agent market that they were able to go get with the Tannehill injury. But I'm happy with what I've seen from the coaching side. Maybe not so much this year, but last year, certainly bringing in a young, bright mind like Adam Gase. Obviously, there's optimism around him and what he could do. So just continuity at the top and finding and identifying the right players and developing those players and knowing who to keep and who to let go is really the framework of any good football organization. And we got to hope that we can trend down that path and get back to a level of consistency that we've lacked for a number of years now.
Yeah, and I get I like watching Cutler, but I really get concerned because whenever he takes a sack, he's falling down and crushing that box of cigarettes he's got in his pocket, and that's not true. So okay, the second one I want to ask you, this one's a little bit golf related, and remember, it's a quick bucket, so quick answer. I don't want you to think about it too much, but if you have to compare these two victories, which one would be the most memorable and important for the history of the game of golf? We're going to go with Jack's 86 Masters or Tiger's 5th jacket.
Wow. You know what? I'll take the latter. I'll take Tiger if he were able to win again, just because the fall has been much harder with him. So if there were ever to be a rise again, it would just be much more monumental, as great as Jack's accomplishment was. And Tiger is just flat out playing against better players, and that's just a reality for all Jack did. It was fantastic, but it's just a much deeper game now. So if that Tiger scenario were to happen again, which it seems like those chances are decreasing every day that goes by, if that hypothetical scenario happened, I would have to side with that one.
Yeah. I really hope I would love just to see him on the back nine on Sunday, close to the lead, and just be paired with one of those young guys, Spieth, Thomas, Reed, Rory. I mean, that's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for much, but man,
it's sad to think that we may never get that.
Oh, it just, I think that's, it is so, I mean, I don't think he owes anyone anything, but gosh, it just feels like everyone just wants that. We want to see it just one more time. So yeah, I think it'd be incredible. And then finally, the last one, you have the opportunity to give a major championship to anyone, any man, any woman, professional, not an amateur. Can't give one to me. Appreciate it, but no. But anyone that has never won a major in the history of the game, who would you give it to?
Wow. Another deep question. I'm probably missing somebody by not digging on my history a little bit and maybe going back in the years. So I'm thinking, I don't know if this is the number one answer out there.
No, this is just for you. This is that's not who's right. Just,
okay, you know what?
You get to give it to whoever you want to.
Okay, all right.
Give it to Casey Martin if you want to. Give it to anyone you want to.
No, you know what? I would say Lee Westwood, and I'm a guy that kind of believes in if there's a totality of your results that just speaks to a tremendous amount of opportunity to win something, and you don't do it. It's much more painful for me to see that person, knowing what I know about this game, to not have won a major. And I don't have the data in front of me, but that guy has finished in the top 3 or 4 in a major many, many, many times over. And I would just go with him. Montgomery is another name, a European player, but I just think that Westwood, given the talented players he was up against and how many times he was so close, that's a guy that I'm not giving up on yet. Him backdooring a British Open or something before it's all said and done. I would go Westwood just on the totality of his results and how many times he was so close.
Well, TJ, I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for joining me here at the Back of the Range Golf Podcast, and I will see you this season at some tournaments.
Okay, thanks for having me, Ben. Enjoyed it.
And there you have it, episode 9 in the books. Thank you so much to TJ Shuart for joining us this week. Again, please tell your friends about this podcast and leave a review where you can. Follow us on Instagram, and I will see you next week at the Back of the Range.